The Private Sector Alliance, that is KEPSA. Later on after that, he will also meet two delegations, one from Kamba political leaders, and after that, Bungoma political leaders as well. That meeting not yet started, but that is what the setup looks like. This is where they will congregate. Several meetings set to take place here. In what format? Mumbi Waroi will tell us during the course of this broadcast, but we are live from that location and we'll cross over there as soon as there is some activity to indicate that they are about to start. Well, let's carry on with the discussion in studio. Before I introduce my panelists, last night on Game Plan 2017 with Hussein Mohammed, the Deputy President William Ruto came to studio to talk about several issues affecting the nation. One, of course, was about the IEBC, which is one of the topics that we are discussing today. And the Deputy President referred to something that many have been talking about since that interview. He asked IEBC Chairperson Wafula Chebukati not to hold night meetings with members of the opposition. Now, for benefit of clarification, let's play that clip one more time, and then we can begin the discussion in studio.
Our competitors won. They don't want an election. That's why they are erecting all these things. We want this guy to leave. We are not going to have an election unless this one does not go. They told us the last time they were not going to participate in an election before his son was not removed. Give us a break, my friend.
So when or where have they been meeting at night?
We'll have another discussion, Hussein, on that. But I have told you, we are telling Chebukati he should stop the night meetings and he should preside over the IEBC.
Okay, you say that
and prepare for the elections.
A very heavy statement there from the Deputy President. This was an interview conducted last night by Citizen TV's Hussein Mohammed on Game Plan 2017. We also have a tweet from the chairperson that was posted after that interview. If we can just put that tweet up on the screen now, just so that our viewers have both sides of the story. And Wafula Chebukati states as follows: rumors regarding my so-called night meetings with NASA are blameless and baseless. Baseless and reckless. That tweet posted there by IEBC Chairperson Wafula Chebukati. To get reactions now from my guest in studio, let me introduce them to you. Gabriel Muduma, political analyst, welcome to the broadcast. Michael Agwanda, political analyst, welcome to the broadcast as well. Cynthia Mutere, governance analyst, many thanks indeed for joining us.
Having me.
And of course, Mark Bichachi, communication strategist, not an analyst. No, just on a lighter note, welcome to the broadcast as well. I want to give each of you a chance to respond to the statement yesterday by the Deputy President and of course the tweet by Wafula Chebukati. Because there are a lot of gentlemen here in studio, let me give Cynthia a chance to begin and just give us your thoughts on that interview and that particular statement in particular.
That particular statement in particular, I think I want to go by what now the Chairman Chebukati has actually tweeted and said that they are baseless. And I think it is completely unfortunate for the Deputy President to make such utterances. Making an independent institution be aligned to one side of the divide then will make the other half feel that they have been unfairly judged in the event that the outcome of the election does not go in their favor. And so for the Deputy President to actually say that they've been holding night meetings with NASA is inappropriate for him to speak that way.
Don't you feel that a man of his standing would have access to intelligence reports, that he wouldn't just be speaking off the out of nowhere?
He's not speaking from out of nowhere, and we do expect that in 35 days that IEBC is burning the midnight oil. But there are midnight meetings. There should be night meetings. There should be all-night meetings, really, and all-day meetings that they're doing in Naivasha. But really to just say that, because IEBC also came out and gave an invitation for both sides of the divide to come to the table where they can come and speak about issues of concern from both sides of a political party and of a coalition. And so that invitation is yet to be honored by the political party Jubilee. Of course, NASA has said they will come to the table if Jubilee then comes to the table to speak. But we do see IEBC now holding night meetings with that NSIS reports, and we are confident that then something is being done, because then we had seen rifts in IEBC that threw that whole team into disarray. And of course now they're having this retreat in Naivasha. Chebukati wants to put his house in order, and we expect it of him. We expect.
I'll come back to you, because I think the issue is not just the night meetings, but who you hold those meetings with. And I'll come back to you for that. Gabriel, I want you to respond to the Deputy President's statement, and of course Wafula's IEBC Chairperson Wafula Chebukati's response?
Yeah, and actually would have liked it to go a little bit further to be told who was, Chebukati meeting with, but that, I think, never extended to that. Probably many people would like to know, but there's something that you've actually alluded to, which, drives the point that, somebody in the hierarchy of a deputy president is privy to information that probably me and you don't have, intelligence that he has, and me and you probably don't have. So we'd like to hear who are these people. But having said that, I think we've also seen how, he was, I don't want to say he was an angry person yesterday. I don't want to use that statement, but he was not somebody who was pleased, and you can understand when he comes out and says that this election actually was done very well. To them, it passed the mark of actually being reversed as it was by the Supreme Court. So you can understand where he's coming from when he said, what, this was our win, it was ours that, had been taken. And so probably what he's saying is that Chebukati must put his house in order, and that is a fact. And probably what I would say from, to Chebukati, apart from the hashtag that we are seeing, mine is to tell him somebody in that position and in that office must develop a very thick skin, because you'll expect a lot of jabs from politicians, and if you're going to make it a habit of every time running to the tweets, then we are going to see a Donald Trump scenario where every time
I can't believe you went there.
No, you can't allow yourself to be baited by tweets. Remember, the deputy president is a politician.
It was unwise for him to go online or his team.
You don't go answering at this point, because you have a task at hand, and that is to deliver a credible election. And honestly, from where I'm seated, and I don't want to say this, but I will still say it, and I stand corrected. Given what I saw in the election on August 8th, and this is something I told Cynthia a while ago, I do not feel we are going to pass the success threshold that we had in August 8th.
What is the percentage threshold that needs to be passed?
Because
Cynthia has a good question.
The way I look at it,
yes. What is the success threshold?
And I'll tell you why. Nobody complained about the numbers. No one complained about the BVR kits. Nobody talked about ballot stuffing. All those never came up. We were told, and this is what everybody knows, and don't be cheated when we talk about computers or generated bifaranga or what have you. Nobody knows what happened within the servers that we are told. That report has not come out yet, unless we preempt.
Even though the Supreme Court raised various issues with
we do not know what they are. We do not, and that is why I'm saying nobody knows. All we can do is preempt what we think went wrong. But as far as we are concerned, all the other pieces went fine.
Okay,
that's why nobody raised an issue.
Michael to come in on this. Go ahead, Michael.
It's a tricky issue. We were talking about the president saying that there are night meetings. I mean, the deputy president. This is an era of Instagram. This is an era of Facebook. This is an era of smartphones.
Yes.
If I have a meeting at night and somebody is privy to that meeting, all they can do is just take the snap out of it, and it is everywhere in the world. Well, for the deputy president to come out and say there are night meetings and he cannot substantiate that, it is a little bit appalling.
Does the man of his standing need to substantiate that?
Yeah, he needed to do that, and I think Hussein followed it up and said, are you able to substantiate that? Which never happened. Really, if there are night meetings, we need to know as a public, and if the government seem to know, because the deputy president is in the government, he should let people know that we're not having faith in this gentleman because he's having night meetings with our opponents. And who stops them from having night meetings for that reason? If they know that their opponents are having meetings with a very individual. But coming into what my brother was talking about in terms of the threshold, my fear is when you hear some people starting to propagate an idea that has actually just returned us into a second presidential election, then we need to be worried. We need to be worried, because if they are already saying that it is practically, in other words, impossible to clean up IEBC, for IEBC to give us a credible election that passes the threshold and is acceptable by all, then what are we talking about here? We're talking about change, or we're talking about the status quo, so that we run into the same problem. Well, the narrative that has been going on here about
the Supreme Court judgment that it was not about numbers. It was, we've seen a lot of this narrative that is going on here. Well, I think these people were smart enough, and Jubilee lawyers were not smart enough to know that the narrative that perhaps the petitioner was putting out there was not about the numbers. Now, if they knew that they were fighting about the system and the process of electioneering, perhaps they would have defended that. They were defending something. They did not. So where we are today, let's not talk in retrogressive, but let's talk about what we can change at IEBC. Not throwing dirt, in my view. When we throw dirt and we don't give suggestion as to how IEBC will be able to handle this election well, then we are putting ourselves in the same place where we are. But last as I finish, my advice to IEBC is very simple. There are political parties that are involved in this thing. If they can consult and consult and consult, and if they know this is an area where we are having problem, and when my brother here is saying that we really don't know what is in the judgment, yet we know very well that in the system, in the server, Chebukati himself is saying, look, my password was used 9,000 plus, so we can't allege that we don't know what happened. We know a bit of it, and from what we know, that's what we discussed today.
Hang on there. Mark, come in.
You know, one of the things that I've decided not to do, Wahiga, is I've decided that I'm going to think as a nationalist and not in a partisan way. The problem that is going on in Kenya today is you are going through something called historical revisionism, where if you ask a white settler who was in Kiambu during the Mau Mau time, the Mau Mau are terrorists. If I ask any Kenyan today, the Mau Mau were heroes. Now here's the reality. Elections are both quantitative and qualitative. You cannot have conversations about the quantity if you cannot determine the quality. You cannot have conversations about the quality if you didn't have the quantity to begin with. So the reality of the matter, both NASA and Jubilee are correct in the assertion that elections are about how many votes you got, but elections are also about how those many votes were gotten and transmitted and therefore tallied. Let's not separate these issues. We are Kenyans. There's not a single Kenyan who wants a president who was elected with a bad quality process, and there's no Kenyan who wants a president who was elected with less than the quantity that is required. That is the reality, and let us think nationally. And what is lacking in this campaign and in this period, and I feel very sorry about it, is that no one is thinking about the interest of the nation. We are only thinking about winning an election, and that's the problem, because after winning an election, you still have a nation to govern. We still have to hold together. Can someone begin to address those issues and stop squabbling about things that are obvious? Every election should be independent.
Because you've given us a unique perspective, how do these two sides find a common ground that they can work towards?
First and foremost, what needs to happen is they need to abandon their hardline stances. Let us understand, Raila Odinga is not Uhuru's enemy, and Uhuru is not the enemy of Raila Odinga. They may portray it to be so, but they are not enemies. Let them sit down and talk and craft the way forward. How did we get multi-party democracy? They sat down with someone who was considered a dictator by all and sundry, and they came up with an agreement. That is how you solve issues. Where there is talk, nothing can go wrong. Let's talk. Let's stop talking at each other and talk to each other.
Okay. Before we carry on with this, Gabriel, I could see almost moving forward with your next point. We are keeping tabs on what's happening around the country on this Monday morning. And for now, we cross over to Dennis Otieno. What we know right now is that taxi drivers who work for app-based taxi companies had threatened to go on strike today, citing various issues, including working conditions, stating that they're not making as much money as they used to because each of these companies are competing to be the best in the market to woo the customers. That's reducing their prices and affecting what taxi drivers can go home with. And so we now cross over to Uhuru Park, where Dennis Otieno is on standby just to tell us, has that strike started and what are their key issues as well. Dennis, good morning. Kindly tell us the latest.
Yes, a very good morning to you, Wahiga Mahura. Yes, and indeed, we're coming to you live from Uhuru Park, and this happens to be the venue where the drivers of these cab-hailing operating platforms were to converge this particular morning. They're still continuing to converge here, and basically they're saying that they've officially begun a strike this morning. From what we are getting is that these drivers are coming under the umbrella body of the Digital Taxi Association of Kenya, and basically what they are saying is that they are protesting against what they term as unfriendly policies coming from their employers. Looking at some of the reasons that they're actually giving for staging this particular strike is that these companies are actually looking at Uber, Taxify, Little Cab, and even Mondo Ride, for that matter. They've actually been engaging in some things without consulting them. Some of the things that they've actually been doing is actually coming up with free rides, and also at the same time coming up with discounts without consulting them, because they're saying actually for some of these things it's good for the customer, but then again for them as drivers it's actually made life a little bit difficult for them. They're using a lot of fuel, and by the end of the day they cannot seem to make ends meet in this particular business. So what is happening this morning is that they're still mobilizing their members in order to continue with this strike during the day. Waiga.
Well, thank you so much, Dennis, for that update from Uhuru Park. Hopefully we'll come back to you later on just to get more updates regarding how this is unfolding, and of course how this is affecting commuters who rely on some of these, can I call them app-based taxi companies to get them to work and to different locations as well, how that will affect business in the city today. We'll go back to Dennis Otieno for more updates during the course of this broadcast. Thank you to everyone who's writing in on 22422. Let me read just two messages here before we take a listen again to something else the Deputy President spoke about yesterday. Mudhoni from Nyeri says, I'd like IEBC to solve their in-house issues and ensure that the election that will be held on 17th will be free, fair, and credible. Somebody here, you don't give us your name, say, I won't spend over 3 months voting and putting everything on standby. Can we get over with it and move on? And someone else here, again, you don't tell us your name or where you're writing from. I humbly submit that IEBC needs to co-opt observers from Jubilee and from NASA in order to create a fair play environment. Let's go back to that interview yesterday where the Deputy President spoke on various issues. He talked about commissioners needing to work together to deliver that election on the 17th of October. But in that same statement, he also referenced the night meetings. Again, let's listen into that little comment.
To the best of our knowledge, mirrors what our competitors have been talking about. And that is why I'm saying they are night meetings. I do not want to discuss here.
But what would you say?
But
you don't want to discuss here.
They've been night meetings between Chebukati and our competitors.
And you can prove that?
They are night meetings between. And if what I am saying is not true, Chebukati should come out and say so, because that's what it is. This memo that was written by Chebukati, when it was put on the carpet by the commission, he was wishy-washy where this memo came from. And so that is our concern.
Are you saying Chebukati is working with your opponents? Is that what you're saying?
From the look of things, if this memo is anything to go by, that is what it is.
Okay, from where we stand as media, we saw this memo coming from Chebukati, not your opponents or anyone else. It was signed by Chebukati.
The same issues that were raised by our competitors in every step of the way are the same issues that are in this memo. And absolutely, we have no problem with this memo as so long as Chebukati agrees with his fellow commissioners on the steps to be taken.
So,
but to begin to look like Chebukati is running away from responsibility and trying to, or maybe it is you, or maybe it is this one, or maybe it is the other one.
Several issues coming out of the Deputy President's statement yesterday, that particular segment. I'll come back to you, Cynthia. Commissioners have been asked to work together to deliver a credible election, but some other issues also have come out of his statement where, on one hand, the government seems to have proof that Chebukati has been meeting with NASA, but on the other hand, the government still seems comfortable to carry on with the election, to have the election held by that same body. Is there a contradiction there, that on one hand, stop the night meetings, but on the other hand, we're okay with you, quickly convene this election, let's get over and done with it?
The Deputy President enjoys the authority of his office to speak with authority. Allegations, I would say false allegations, that he would now make them as authority, because when now he's asked to prove them, then he says, ask Chebukati. And Chebukati has answered him and said, these are baseless allegations that you're leveling against me, that I'm having night meetings with the National Super Alliance. When the elections were run for 8th of August, 5 hours into the election, there was already that whole algorithm debacle that was brought into question when we came into the Supreme Court. Those lawyers were able to display those things and poke holes in every area where we felt that there was a flaw in the elections. This again, when IEBC has gone back to their in-house evaluation and self-evaluation, they have come up with the same things. Now, if these two now agree, some of the things that were brought out in the Supreme Court by the lawyers, and when IEBC has evaluated themselves and the chairman brings out some of these issues, it doesn't mean that the two of them have sat and agreed on some of these issues. There are gaps, and these gaps need to be addressed. And so it's important that IEBC, as they're retreating, now find solutions to these gaps. How did these gaps come about when we were supposed to be assured that they were prepared to run elections? And now how will they now be able to now convince the general public that we are the same management who are sitting on this table, who are running this institution, and are going to deliver a credible election?
Do you think the Commission and Secretariat, and I'll come to you, Gabriel, shortly, can find a way to work together, but more importantly, can trust each other?
Because right now it's become a political question when you're seeing both sides of the divide taking on the heads of the Commission and the head of the Secretariat. And basically, even when you saw from now the people who are being interviewed from the streets in Mombasa or Wasingisho, you could see the alignments of some of the views, that some of them are for Chebukati, let Chiloba go, or some of them are for Chiloba, let Chebukati go. And so now what does that do for IEBC? Of course IEBC can sit. I mean, some of the things that when you're doing an interview is your experience, and experience over the years means that there's interpersonal relationships. There's been some places where you were not able to work together, then there will be places where they have to work it out in the retreat. Yes, and then you have to know how to work together. So internally they will be able to work together, but outside here in the political space, I mean, the lines have been drawn. Clearly. And we are tearing our independent institution apart.
I'll say two things, and very quickly. Number one, when you listen to a politician, half of the time they'll leave you, actually in the middle of the lake. And that's one thing I dislike about politicians. 2013, in the advent of coming now to 2017, the issue was not the chairman. All right? No, actually, the issue was the chairman. It was Isaac Hassan. That man must leave. Oswago was okay because he was the CEO. There was no problem with the Secretariat. Fast forward to today, same thing. The problem is no longer the CEO, the chairman, it is the CEO. We need the CEO and other people that NASA has mentioned, we need them out. What kind of investigation did you do to realize that these are the people who are the problem with IEBC? That is something that needs to be investigated. We don't have time to talk about that, but that just tells you, it creates a scenario whereby there is more in this situation that needs the eye. Probably there's somebody punishing NASA or Jubilee for that matter, but let me talk about NASA because they are the people who are talking about several people leaving, the Secretariat and the Commission, and that just gives you an element of imbalance to even ask yourself, how did they determine these were the people who are the problem? Yet we have not seen what the Supreme Court has to tell us. And that's why I'm saying we can sit here and speculate as much as we want, but from what the DP was saying, it's as if some people in NASA have seen the comprehensive judgment from the Supreme Court. That is one. Number two, when you look at what Chebukati brought forth in that memo, let me tell you things that I noticed, and this is truth, and somebody said truth will always remain truth, whether it's subjected to 0 degrees
political divide you are on.
Exactly, truth will remain to be truth. Now, when I look at that memo, two things come out. It is so well written to an extent that it is not the chairman himself who sat alone. Yet, As he
how do you come to that conclusion? Okay.
It can't be him alone. There are so many things. Let me tell you.
Then capable.
No, I am not saying that. Unless you're telling me he's a lone ranger, there is no way he can come up with that, and I stand to that statement. There's no way.
Okay.
Because if you look at the points, number one, it was a memo. Because why I'm saying it's not alone, half of the commissioners have actually distanced themselves from that memo, which means this memo was written to the CEO, should have had the backing of all the commissioners. And this is why I think the problem is, that is number one. Now, when you come to that memo, it is confidentially, if I may add, written to the CEO. What happened? How did it leak out? We need to ask these questions. If there was a serious issue, anybody who has run a company and who knows the wheels of how a company should run, how is finance, how is ICT, would tell you in such an event where they have been told by the court you did 1, 2, 3, which at this point they don't know, they would have called in, exactly, they would have gone to something called a crisis meeting. Any person can tell you that. In that crisis meeting, you ask this man who is in charge of ICT, Mark, what went wrong? And you come up with a platform and saying this is what our people need to hear. And this is not demarcating the kind of sideshows we are seeing at IEBC. And that is why you see when you go out to the places that you've gone with your cameraman, every person is telling you about something called a credible election. And that's why I've always questioned the process, the credibility of the process, up to a point whereby the president is announced. It needs to be above board. And on this one, I would support the Supreme Court when we talk about the credibility of the entire process. And it does not need to be entangled in the sophisticates of technology. Let me finish. Because the Gambia showed us that it does not matter how simple you do an election, as much as it has the credibility. You can use marbles to name a president and remove a dictator from power. So why did we not see that with the kind of budget that was allocated? That's number one. Number two, do we have people who did not want this election? And they knew the best that we could do is to infiltrate, seriously infiltrate, and make sure that this thing does not look credible. Is there a chance? I tell you, there is a chance.
Let me bring Mike into this discussion as well, allow you to comment.
The memo, looking like it is from our competitor. That is, to me, not questionable, because it is a competitor that actually did a petition, and it is out of that petition that the presidential election was annulled. And for that reason, there is precedence. There's something that you can refer to, and it was indeed a public document. If somebody wants to read what NASA took to court, they can do that, and it's on the basis of that very, very petition. That's why the presidential election was nullified. If Chebukati therefore decides, even before the full report from the Supreme Court comes out, let's also look at some of these things that the Supreme Court agreed with the NASA principles. Perhaps this is what we need to base on, sort of look at, foresee what the judgment is going to look like. And therefore, for you to say that it looks like it, it should be it, because that's what really IEBC needs to look at and say, these are some of the problems that are being mentioned. Did we sort of, had a problem here amongst ourselves? What I've always said before is, look, if Chebukati realized that now the buck stops with them, and actually the deputy president said, let him not pick a corner kidogo, the buck stops with them. If he realized that there was a problem within IEBC, it is his mandate as a chairman of the board to bring, chairman of the commission to bring the order. He really, if he wants to write a memo, he really does not need every commissioner to agree on that memo. If he feels that his name was used for more specifically,
he doesn't need to see consensus before he sends it out.
Consensus, because he can go into the server. He's a chairman. He can go into the server and see whether his name was used. If he feels that 848 million was used to buy satellite phones, he does not have to inquire from from NASA's petition or anybody else, he will just say, but where was this delivered? I am the chairman. If I'm the chairman, I needed to see some of these things. They were not even out there. If he's questioning how many polling stations have been added into this thing, if he's questioning how many numbers, forms that did not have serial numbers, these are legitimate questions. It doesn't have to come from NASA or from any other divide. It is an internal memo that requires an investigation. And perhaps what they needed to have done was to say, why can't we have an internal investigation to see whether these things that are being alleged to have happened here indeed happened? And
maybe
if
that
they
was
did
part
happen,
of his memo.
yes,
maybe that was the intention.
Maybe that was the intention. Now, if it did happen, perhaps they need to come out now in public and say, we had our own internal investigation, and this is what we found out. I believe that is what he was trying. But let me conclude as I say this. Really, the way forward, we can talk about all this that have happened and what will happen and what won't happen, but if we cannot agree on one thing, that if in the IEBC want to conduct this election, they need to bring observers from NASA. They need to bring observers perhaps from even the Fourth Estate. They need to get observers from Jubilee and put them. If it is the ICT problem that was realized in this thing, that perhaps did not transmit the right result, and the interference of the ICT process, maybe they need to have their ICT experts sit down and say, we are monitoring this before, during, and after. And if there's a problem, we will come up and say, we did this and we didn't see any problem. Until they do that, we will still be suspecting that something is cooking that we really don't know where it's from.
Well, I certainly hope they're taking time from their retreat to listen to some of these discussions here. Mark, even as you want to respond to what they've said, I also want to ask you, a 3-day retreat, is that sufficient to find middle ground, to build trust again, to forgive each other? Because you can clearly see that there's been a lot of things that have been happening within the IEBC.
You know, one of the funniest things is once you remove the politics out of this issue, the IEBC actually has a very simple thing to do. They have a judgment, they know what went wrong, and they know how to fix it. Now here's the thing. Kenya needs to remember that we've not run out of space for petitions. If the IEBC conducts the election in the same way as they did in August 8th, and NASA wins, and Jubilee goes to court, the Supreme Court will rule the same way because the circumstances are the same. It will be insanity for us to approach this election with the same circumstances in play. Because if anyone petitions, including Gabriel Mutuma or Cynthia here, if they petition with the same circumstances, that election will be enough.
The verdict will probably be the same.
Exactly. So the reality of the matter is we need to understand that there are changes that must happen, whether we like it or not. That's one. And those changes, are these 3 days enough? Now here's the thing. The beauty about being truthful is you don't need to synchronize. The beauty about being independent is you do not need to consider other people. So the reality of the matter, if they sit down and decide to be truthful and decide to be independent and say, you know what, NASA and Jubilee, we will do what is best for this country, they'll be fine. But if they choose to take into political considerations, innuendos and cloak and dagger techniques, they'll be in there for another 60 days. The reality of the matter, the best way out of it is to come out and say, we will stand for what is right, we will stand for truth, we will stand by our process and make sure it works. They come out as winners. But if they're going to do political considerations and political mathematics, they've already failed even before they start.
Gabriel really shaking his head. I won't allow him to comment.
I agree. I totally agree.
We take the break with you.
I totally agree.
You agree with him. We need to take a quick break. When we return, we carry on with this discussion. We also look at election timelines. In spite of everything that is happening right now, what you should know is that the election plan was actually set out from last week or the previous week. A lot of things I'm not quite sure have started. We need to look at what needed to have happened over the last couple of days, what hasn't started, and how IEBC will quickly need to work moving forward if we're going to make October 17th as an election date and an election that will be conducted in a free, fair, credible and transparent manner. A lot needs to be happening starting now.
The word verifiable should be
verifiable as well. Cynthia reminds me, verifiable, free, fair, transparent, verifiable. If that election is to happen in that manner, then the IEBC has a lot on its plate. We'll talk about that and so much more on the other side of this break. In addition, we have our teams across the country. We are live from State House and from different parts of Nairobi as well. We'll give you updates also on the other side of this broadcast. You're watching Citizen Extra live on Citizen TV. We'll be right back.